The E-100, the Maus, the Doom Turtle and others. You've seen them in games and in models. But almost everything you think you know about them is wrong. Welcome on the Brickfield. I'm Brickmeat, and this is the ultimate myth and facts check of the world's most exotic tanks. Many people say this turret is wrong, but in reality it's spot on. In games like World of Tanks and War Thunder, you'll see two different E-100 turrets, one based on a planned angular design, the other using the Maus turret. Most assume the Maus turret is just lazy or incorrect. In fact, the real E-100 was only completed as a hull. A new angular turret was planned, but until it was ready, the E-100 would likely have used the Maus turret. The surviving hull was captured by the British and is now on display in Bovington. And Bovington is also home to another giant with an equally confusing name. This isn't a T28. Well, actually it is, and it's also a T95. Many believe the T28 and T95 were two separate tanks. In 1945 it was called the T28, later renamed to T95 gun motor carriage, and in 1946 renamed back to T28. The double tracks were removable for road transport, which is why it looks different in photos. It was designed to smash through the strongest German defenses, like the Siegfried Line. Of the two vehicles built, one caught fire and was scrapped. The other survives today in the National Armor Cavalry Museum in Fort Benning. But while the T-28 crawled forward at walking speed, our next tank was so big it barely fit on a road, the largest tank ever built, and yet it never went to war. Some claim the Maus was combat ready or even saw action. In truth, two prototypes were built, only one with a turret, and none ever saw battle. The surviving example is actually a combination of the damaged prototypes, assembled after the war and now displayed in Kubinka, Russia. But if the Maus was the largest tank, the Soviets had a contender that was just as extreme. The Soviet super heavy tank, weighing nearly 70 tons, but looking like it rolled straight out of the 1980s. In games, the IS-7 often appears as a standard production model. In reality, only one prototype was built in 1948. It featured an automatic loading system, the first Soviet tank with a hydraulic transmission, an electric fan, and night vision equipment for the driver. It was too heavy and complex for mass production. That single prototype still exists today in the Kubinka Tank Museum. And while the IS-7 was sleek and modern, our next vehicle looked like it came from another era entirely. A mortar. So big it had to be moved on railway tracks, or on tracks of its own. Many think Karl-Gerät only existed as a tracked self-propelled gun. In fact, there were several versions, each named after Norse gods like Baldur, Thor, Odin. A few survive today in Kubinka and in Germany. And speaking of absurdly long vehicles, let's look at something that's more of a meme like a tank. The longest tank anyone ever seriously built, and it looks like a joke. Some think that TOG II is just a World of Tanks meme. In reality, the British prototype was built in 1941, inspired by World War I designs, and it was already obsolete the day it rolled out. Only one was built, and you can still see it today at the Bovington Tank Museum. But the British weren't the only ones with strange prototypes. Germany had its own oddities too. A Tiger almost nobody recognizes, and one that never went into full production. Most people only know the Porsche turret from Tiger II, but early Tiger I test vehicles also had their own Porsche turret design. The hulls from these were later converted into Ferdinand and Elephant tank destroyers. Nothing went to waste. Almost none survive in their original form today. And if the Porsche turret is rare, the next vehicle is even rarer. A Japanese tank. That's common in games, but almost didn't exist in reality. The long gun version of the Chi-Ha wasn't standard at all. Only a handful were converted late in the war, using a naval gun, a 127mm weapon, originally designed for warships. Very few survive, and the handful on display are mostly in Asian museums. And from late war Japan, we moved to a German project that never left the drawing board. A tank that never existed. except as a wooden mock-up, and this one in plastic. Many believe they were working Coelian prototypes. In truth, only a wooden model was built, and no functional vehicle was ever produced. The project was cancelled before even a single prototype was completed. And while the Coelian never fired a shot, our final entry could hit targets over 40 kilometers away. So big, a tank could park inside the barrel, and so impractical, it barely fired at all. Many think Gustav was a super weapon that changed the war. In reality, only 2 were built. They were incredibly difficult to move and operate, and saw action only once during the siege of Sevastopol, where it fired just 48 rounds at the fortress. One was destroyed, the other scrapped. Today only fragments remain in museums. So the next time someone tells you this is the T95, you'll know they've been playing more games than reading history books.